If there is one thing that can kinda sorta unite the Godzilla fandom sometimes, it's our love for Godzilla toys. Collecting Godzilla figures is one of the biggest parts of the fandom, and it has been for as long as there have been Godzilla figures. From Bandai to NECA to Playmates to Sofubis to Gashapons and whatever else, people love owning toys of the big green idiot and his monster co-stars. But for the past decade, one line of Godzilla figures has stood out from the rest as one of the cream of the crop when it comes to the world of figure collecting, and that line is SH MonsterArts. SH MonsterArts is a line that focuses on highly detailed and highly articulated figures of Godzilla monsters from all across the series, from Heisei to Monsterverse to Heisei to Millennium to Heisei to Showa once in a blue moon. While the line has had many ups and downs in terms of its figure output over time, SH MonsterArts is still generally regarded as a great line of figures that, while are expensive, make up for it with impressive sculpts and a great range of mobility that can't be found anywhere else. However, since I got into this line back in 2015, there has been one figure that I've been dreaming they would make, a figure of my favorite Godzilla monster, Gigan. Wait, they already did that? They did that twice? And I own both of them? Okay, let me rephrase that. I've been waiting for them to make a figure of the original version of Gigan as long as I've been into this line. And in November of 2022, as a part of the Godzilla Day celebrations, we were shown this, an SH MonsterArts 1972 Gigan, and my god, it looked glorious. A couple months later, and we got some more pictures of this figure, showcasing it in poses ripped straight out of both production pictures of Godzilla vs. Gigan, but also scenes from that movie as well. It wasn't one-to-one with the original suit, but it looked so good that I did not care. So naturally I bought it, and after having it for about a week now, I've got some things to say about it. Normally, I don't do figure reviews like this, but given that I, Sam T. Gigan fan, am the #1 authority on all Gigan things on the internet, I figured that I might as well give my thoughts on this toy and tell you what I think of it. So, what do I think of the SH MonsterArts Gigan 1972? I think it's good. Is this figure perfect? No, of course not. There are some obvious issues and flaws that he has, and we will get to those in just a moment, but overall, I'm really impressed with this figure and what it brings to the table. One of the first things that immediately strikes me is how good this figure looks. One of the big issues that has hit the SH MonsterArts line in recent years is how the transition from prototype to final product is not always the best. It's gotten much better in recent years, but it's still definitely an issue that plagues even the most recent releases in this line. However, I am happy to report that Gigan is basically perfect in terms of this transition. Comparing the pictures of the prototype to the final product, it's basically flawless. There are some differences, like how the transition from gold to green is much softer on the prototype versus the much harsher transition on the final product, but honestly, that's really only something that you can find when you're really looking at both of them side by side. Hell, I only found that out when I was typing the script for this video. In regards to the paint, there are barely any paint mishaps on my figure. The only blemishes that I can find are that the little tooth on the inside of the mouth has some red bleeding onto it, and the left side of Gigan's body has some gold paint ever so slightly bleeding onto the green parts. Honestly though, these are easy to overlook and are by no means deal breakers for this figure. Overall, this guy looks stunning. Like I said, it's not 100% accurate to the suit, with the biggest change being that the head is ever so slightly elongated in comparison to the suit, but yet again, you can easily overlook that. While the green and gold are a bit more drab than what I'm used to when I think of Showa Gigan, when you take it into the light, those gold bits, along with the silver used throughout the figure, really catch the light well and they look gorgeous. Also, the translucent red used for the eye and the translucent plastic for the wings also look really nice when you shine the light onto it. Don't worry, I'll get to that part later. So when it comes to the looks department, Gigan certainly has the looks, but how well does he move? Now, there is one thing that I'm sure you can notice just by looking at this guy for 2 seconds. He's got no waist joint. Now, a good waist joint can allow a figure to schmoove around and get into all sorts of wacky poses, but with Showa Gigan lacking one, you'd assume he'd be pretty stiff in the articulation department, but shockingly enough, Gigan is actually quite poseable. He's got the usual parts, the head, the arms, the legs, and the tail, but the key to Gigan's articulation success is the range of some of these joints. Gigan's head can move really far up to replicate a flying pose, and it can also move down decently far too. The hook hands can move in and out thanks to them being on ball joints, and the knees have a great in and out motion as well as forwards and backwards. The feet also have a pretty solid pivot to them as well, and the tail is insanely poseable. This is one of the best posing tails on an SH MonsterArts figure that I have in my collection. Put all these features to work and Gigan can be put into some decently dynamic poses. Not too bad for a figure with no waist joint. Everything seems to be fine and dandy with this figure. It moves great, it looks great, so what could possibly be bad about this figure? Oh, So when this figure came out in Japan, there were quite a few issues considering breakage with the wings, and there is a reason why. Remember when I mentioned that the wings were made out of a translucent plastic? Well, the figure was advertised with the ability to be put into a flying pose, and how you can move the wings out to replicate that pose. And while you can do that, it has to do that via a system in which you pull out the wings out and then move them outwards. All of this while using translucent ball joints. And if you know anything about translucent plastic, then you know it is very prone to breakage, much easier than solid color plastic. And let me tell you something, for the first day or so that I had this figure, I was terrified of moving these wings for that exact reason. Eventually though, I did work up the courage to move them, and yeah, they do look pretty cool when they are spread out, but I have to ask why this was done in the first place. The Final Wars Gigan had it so that the wings were attached on the hinges, and I feel much more secure moving these wings around than just popping out the ball joint and moving them around. I feel like they could have gotten away with a similar system on this figure, but at the same time, I totally get wanting to keep things more screen accurate and going with a more risky engineering, rather than playing it safe and potentially screwing up the accuracy of the figure. But it's still a really strange decision, and one that definitely brings down my overall rating of the figure. Another thing that may or may not bring down the rating of this figure for you is the price point. $120 if you buy him domestically. Granted, you could have bought him from Japan when he was on pre-order there for significantly less, but if you're watching this video now, then you either have already done that or you haven't, and if you haven't, this is your only option. Look, it's no secret that since this line began, there's been a considerable markup from figures from then to now. Your average run-of-the-mill Godzilla would charge you about $70 then, and now it's over $30 more with a distinct lack of accessories. Gigan is one such figure. I could easily see this figure going for about $80 back when the line began, and now it's $40 more. This is especially weird to me because whenever Bandai decides to bring over these figures to the US, they decide to look at the yen and the USD and say, well, this figure's about 12,000 yen, so it's about $120. Bada bing bada boom, there we go. This is not how conversion rates go, kiddies. If Bandai actually followed the conversion rates, then this figure would be, what do you know, about $80. Why Bandai does this? I have no idea. Maybe it's to get a little extra cash out of people whenever they buy this figure overseas, but still, charging so much for a figure that really is not worth that much is a bit ludicrous. Now, I'm not one of those guys who complains that we don't get any accessories with SH MonsterArts figures, because more often than not, I'm not going to pose a figure with a beam or whatever other gadgets or gizmos it may come with. I just want the figure to sit on my shelf and look cool as hell. This doesn't apply to every release, of course. There are a couple of figures in which I think they should have absolutely come with more than what they got. Heat ray pieces would have been great for figures like Godzilla 2021 and Godzilla 1991, and also figures that do come with numerous weapons and parts should obviously come with those weapons and parts. Kong and Jet Jaguar should come with their melee weapons, Mechagodzilla should come with their battle packs, and Final Wars Gigan should come with the swappable pieces. Those are all fine, but for something like Showa Gigan, what could you really have? A flight stand? Yeah, I can pose him with that. Buildings? Not using those. A beam accessory? He didn't have one in the movie, so why now? The only thing that I could think would be cool is having bloody hook hands and buzzsaw to replicate some scenes from the movie, but I think even then I would just stick with the normal versions of those any day of the week. I absolutely get why these people make those comments about accessories and whatnot. It's because there needs to be something to justify the prices that these figures are going for. But for me personally, I'm not paying $120 for Showa Gigan to have some accessories I'm never going to use. I'm paying $120 for Showa Gigan because it's Showa Gigan, my favorite monster in the entire Godzilla series. That enough, I think, is enough valid justification for paying what I did. Some people might come at me saying that I'm dumb for doing this, but to be honest, I really could not care less. Yeah, I could have pre-ordered it when it went up in Japan, but then I wouldn't have known about the problem with the wings, and I wouldn't have gotten the thoughts of other people who did pre-order it and give their 2 cents on this figure. And if that means potentially spending a lot more on a figure just to make sure that I know all the ins and outs about it, then honestly, I'd say that's a fair deal. So overall, do I think the SH MonsterArts Gigan 1972 is the best Gigan figure of all time? Yeah, kinda. The issues with the wings and price aside, this figure is just incredible. It might be good old-fashioned recency bias talking, cause again, I've barely had this thing for a week, but it truly is a fantastic figure with incredible detail and great articulation. Looking at it with an objective lens, is it the best SH MonsterArts figure? Absolutely not. I wouldn't even say it's the best one in my collection, but it's definitely up there for being one of my personal favorites for sure. I mean, considering that it's a highly detailed, highly articulated figurine of my favorite Godzilla monster, how could I not love it? With that said though, So, do I think you should get it? If you are a massive fan of Gigan such as myself, then absolutely. You will certainly get your money's worth with this guy. If you aren't as big a fan, then you can either skip out on him or wait until he goes down in price. It's not like we don't have any good Showa Gigan figures on the market. I mean, the Bandai one is right there. But overall, I'm very happy with this Gigan figure, despite any shortcomings he may have. And considering that MonsterArts just recently announced the 1972 Godzilla to go alongside this Gigan, then this guy will be in some pretty good company pretty soon. And you know what? Maybe I'll even pick up a 1973 Gigan if MonsterArts decide to do that one. Not only because of how much I enjoy this figure, but because I have every MonsterArts Gigan, and at this point I cannot stop. But hey, at least I have a job that pays well, so at least I can afford it. And with all that said and done, that wraps up another silly Sam the Gigan fan video. I've never done a figure review like this before, so if you like the format, then too bad. I'm never doing this again. I only did this because it's Gigan and I love that idiot, so yeah. Anyways, if you guys have this figure, what do you think of it? Did you agree with anything that I said, or did you have any issues with the figure that I may have overlooked? Be sure to sound off those thoughts and more in the comment section down below, and be sure to follow me on my social medias and join my Discord server if you want updates on upcoming videos, or just want to hear my goofy rants about all sorts of stuff. And if you liked what I saw and want to see more, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. Either way, I'm Sam the Gigan fan, hoping that you all have a lovely rest of your day, and telling you all to wash your hands.